Hey guys, this is the instructional video for the dot matrix RGB shield and how to solder it. If you've never broken these header pins before, I already pre-broke them for this video, but it's super easy. You just count how many pins that you want on your section, put your pliers on one of each side where you want it to break, and you just snap it. It's really easy, and yeah. Alright, so let's get started with the soldering. The first solder is going to be on the top of the board, and this is going to be the only solder on the top of the board. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 8x2 header pin section. We're going to place it a little bit into our flux so it'll stick. We'll clean this off when we're done, but you just put it in there so it sticks nice. And flip the board over. See how it's staying in there? Grab your soldering iron. We're just going to solder the corner pin just to make sure that it's going to stay. Okay, so now it's on there, and we'll go ahead and solder all the other pins. It's always hard to do this video because the camera's in my face and I can't really get a good angle on the soldering, so if it goes slow, that's why. Okay, so the soldering connection is done for the top of the board, and you want to make sure that when you do this you don't put this facing the wrong way because it's really hard to take off and it'll make a mess. So make sure for this the pins are facing up from the top of the board. Top board is done, very easy. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 8x1 single row pin section, dip a little bit in the flux so it sticks, and this is going to go on the line labeled power. And we're just going to put this into the bottom of the board. Get it nice to stick, and this is really important. You got to make sure this one's straight so it plugs into the Arduino well. So really make sure you get enough flux on there that it sticks, and really make sure you push it down so it's flush with the board and stays straight. So we're going to turn it over, we're going to solder the far left pin, then the far right pin, then do them all. Really important when you're doing this to make sure that you don't bridge any connections across these pins because you could cause a short circuit and destroy your power supply, your Arduino, and everything else connected to this. Alright, so that looks good. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to grab our excuse me, our 4x1 single row pin section, dip it into the flux, and we're going to put it on the left side labeled A0-17 facing down. So you want to see the solder pins come out on the left side from the top. So put it in there. I got to give a little more flux on that. Okay. So put it in there. The most important thing, make sure it is straight and lined up with the other pins. Flip it over. Solder both sides. Looks good. They're all very straight. It's exactly what we want. Alright. Next up, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the last single row section. It's going to be the 7x1 row. We're going to put it up on the row labeled PWM 18-3. So get some solder on the bottom of it. Just dip it into your flux. Sorry, get some flux on the bottom of it. Dip it into your flux. And we're going to want this on the right side facing up, so put it on the bottom of the board. Make sure it's nice and straight. Solder it in. Most important thing on soldering these, make sure you don't push the pins down. If you do that, they'll get out of alignment and it won't be straight for when you plug it into the Arduino. And you can always bend the pins a little bit, but if you put it on straight, you don't have to mess with it at all. Okay. Now we have two more solders and our board is completely finished. For this, I need to turn my board around a little bit. And we're going to be soldering our double row header pins into this labeled digital out. So we'll take our 5x2 section of header pins, dip the soldering pins in the flux, and we're going to stick them to the far side of this digital out where the T is, all the way at the end. So see, it reads digital out, and to the T side we're going to be soldering all the way over here. And I would solder each corner of this first just to make sure it's in there. And honestly, I'm going to finish the rest of this when I can take it off of my PCB holder, just because it's going to be really hard to get in there with that and the camera in the way. And then our last piece, 2x1, this is your, I think it's a ground and VCC pin, but it goes at the bottom right of the digital out. So like if you're looking at the digital out, well, I'm looking at it from the back, so it's going to be your left. But where the D is, you put this all the way in here facing down. So put a little bit of flux on it, turn it around, make sure it's straight and goes in. Okay, make sure it's straight. Okay. Now, I'm going to take it off and finish those connections and we're done. Congratulations, your RGB dot matrix shield is completed. You have the digital communication pins facing out from the front of the board, and all of these power and signal pins facing down, and these will plug into your Arduino, and then you'll have a really nice, easy little way to interface with your dot matrix. So, to plug this into your Arduino, super easy. You get your Arduino Mega, you get your shield, you turn it around, and you pop it in. And the best way to pop this in is line up these two pins with this side, and then the rest will fall into place. But make sure you push it all in at once so you don't bend or break anything. So just line these guys up. Look at that. See, the rest of the pins are lining up. These guys are all in, and then you just gently take your fingers on each edge of the board, just wiggle it down, and it'll go in nice and easy, see? There you go. It's completely in. So when it comes to powering the Arduino, there's a million ways to do it. You could have solar panels, you could have a battery, you could solder it directly, you could use a barrel jack. You could do whatever you really want to come up with that best suits the needs of your project. The easiest thing that I found using a DC 5-volt power source is to put a barrel jack at the end of the main power connector for the matrix, and then solder these wires here to directly plug into the Arduino so that it's all powered off of the same power supply. So I'm going to show you how I do that, and if you think this method would work for you, then please follow along. So I want to grab the main power connectors, and the first thing I want to do is cut off these two ends here. Then I'm going to use my stripper and strip the end of the wire so that I can solder it. Oops. Wrong one. There we go. Okay, so we got two exposed copper ends of the wire. Where this is going to go is into our barrel jack. And the barrel jack is labeled with a negative positive, you can see on each side. So what we want to do now that we have our ends cut off is we want to stick the negative end of each of our exposed copper into the negative end of our barrel jack. And then we want to use our screwdriver to tighten it. Make sure those stay in there really good. Tighten it all the way down, really, clamp it in there Make sure that you turn it as tight as you can. Okay, so our ground supply is in there. It's in there really good. We give it one more turn. Okay. And then we take our voltage supplies for the Arduino and for our main power. Put these both in there. Then we tighten our voltage supply. Tighten it really good. You really want to clamp it in there. Okay. You don't want to go so tight you strip it, but you really want to tighten it. See, now that's really tight in there. I can't pull that out unless I really, really, really yanked on it. Okay. Now that they're in there, we want to wrap those with electrical tape between them so that there's never a short and we don't cause any problems. We're going to wrap around the ground wire. And then once we've wrapped twice around the ground wire, go ahead and wrap it around all of the wires. So now there's an insulating layer between them. They're in there really good. And it looks a little better than just exposed copper sticking out. And now our wires are in there nice and secure. And you can go ahead and tape it as tight or as much as you want, but just a little bit of tape is sufficient. Now that we have our power line done, this is how you would connect it entirely to the board in the Arduino. So to take this off, you kind of just start gently wiggling the corners back and forth. And it'll pop out pretty easy. So that's how you take it off. And we want to do the 5-volt pin and the ground pin. So let's put this 5-volt pin in here. I'm going to bend it down so it doesn't touch anything or go near anything. Solder it on. Okay, it's in there good. Take the ground pin. I want to bend it away from the other stuff because I don't want it touching those pins. And you can cut it with wire cutters at the end of this, you know, so it doesn't come any close to anything. Okay, that is in there really good. It's not going anywhere. We'll pop our shield back on. Okay, it's in there nice and tight. We got our power lines in. We got our barrel jack. And now we need to connect this to our dot matrix display. To connect the Arduino to the dot matrix display, the first thing we want to do is grab our ribbon cable. Okay, so we got our ribbon cable here, and what we're going to do is on the left side of the dot matrix display, there's a 16 pin called put in. That's for the input. So to connect our Arduino to the dot matrix, what we need to do is take our ribbon cable, and we have to have the Arduino sitting to the left side. And on the left side here where it says put in, we're going to plug in our ribbon cable and then plug in our Arduino. And make sure that your Arduino is facing the same way, because if you plug it in this way, it's backwards and it won't work. So plug it in this way and all of the data pins will be connected to their correct lines. So now that we have our data lines connected, we have our Arduino power wired to our main power supply, we need to connect our main power for the dot matrix. Now here they give you 2 of these ends. That's if you want to put 2 of these boards in parallel so you can control a larger display. We only need 1 of them, so pick 1 of the ends and just securely clip it to where it says VCC and ground on the dot matrix. Push it in until it gives a little click. All of our power supplies are wired up and working. So now that we've got some code in this thing, we've got all the power connection and data lines hooked up, let's plug it in and see what she looks like. For this, I always use a 5-volt power source. A 4-amp power source is recommended, but as long as you don't fill up the board at the brightest setting with white light, a 3 amp power supply is more than fine. So here's what it looks like. It's kind of blurry for the camera. It looks a little less blurry if you diffuse it with a piece of paper. But in real life it looks great.